Okay, so I've started the recording. Today we're going to cover lesson 10. I've jumped ahead a little bit. Instead of lesson 9, I thought it would be more helpful for all of you with the next assignment, with a skateboard assignment, to learn a bit about patterns and gradients. They can really dress up an illustration, the design. And over the years, Illustrator has improved on that feature, and it's really very robust. I think the little illustration that they have here is really quite nice. They don't have us do all of it, but we cover some of the basics and the different kinds of gradients they have. The second part of the lesson is the following, and this is where we cover patterns. And patterns also can be quite helpful in dressing up an illustration and adding texture. Patterns can be developed quite easily, and yet at the same time, depending on the kind of pattern that you want to develop, it can be very complex. And like many things in Illustrator, there's a really robust library of patterns for you to use that are built in. Likewise, there are a variety of gradients that you have available to you, libraries of gradients that you can use and edit and add to if you wish. So this is the end file. We've got a little jellyfish under the sea here. And I'm going to go to the start file, like so. So this is what we're starting with. And if you look at layers, there's actually a whole bunch of stuff like the extras. You can see there's a lot of stuff that we don't have to do, okay, as well as the type and that sort of thing. But in terms of blends, in terms of the plants themselves, the extras, we're going to go ahead and we're going to do all of those things. So just to let you know, if you haven't looked at it yet, that there's a lot that they've already completed for us. I want to start by looking at the gradient panel. And remember, I have Essentials Classic. So if you don't see that over here, you can always go to the Windows menu and you can make sure that you bring up the gradient panel from here. Anytime you don't see a panel over here, just go under the window menu and open it up. And we'll also be using the gradient, the gradient tool as well. But like the other day with, we were working with color, there's like 4 or 5 different ways. There's a lot of redundancy built into Illustrator. So there's a lot of different ways of doing this. So let's look at the panel and observe the different kinds of gradients that we can have. So for starters, if we look at the type of gradient, there's 3 types of gradients that you can have. Actually, there are 4, but it isn't included in here. We have a linear gradient. We have a radial gradient, which is this one. And we have the freeform gradient. This is the newest. This was released like a year or 2 ago. In addition to that, we have the gradient or mesh. They call it the mesh tool now, but it's the gradient mesh tool. And it's very similar to the freeform tool. But the freeform tool was added more recently and is a little bit, I think, more sophisticated. But like many things with Adobe, they don't omit or delete features. They just simply continue to add them. So now they're not covering the gradient mesh anymore. They're using the freeform tool. Over to the left, and you can apply gradients to strokes now, but typically we will be using the fills. So with the fill selected by default, we can see that we have a black and white stroke or black and white gradient here. If I click on this little tab right here, you can see that there are a handful of other gradients in here, like the one that was added for this lesson, the plant. or the super soft vignette, or fade to sky, or things like that. Okay, and then we can add to that. You can add your own gradient. The tool down here, right beneath the fill, allows you to reverse a gradient just on the fly. That if it's going from left to right, you can immediately have it go from right to left, or so on and so forth. This allows you to change the angle of the gradient. And then we have other features right here to be able to change the aspect ratio if you wish. And that can be, especially for the radial gradient. That's why it's not selected now. And then the last one, which is probably the most important down here, is that by default, you can see that we have a white to black gradient. And if I want to change the colors here that they call, what do they call them here? They're stop colors. Yeah. So this is white. So if you click on it, it tells you we can control the opacity and the location from here if you want a specific percentage. Likewise here. Now, if you want to actually change this to a different color, then what you have to do is, the easiest way to do that is to double click on it. Oops, there we go. And it brings up, I can't say by default, but you have multiple options. We have the swatch panel. You can use a color picker, or you can use the CMYK callouts here, or if you're working in RGB, it'd be RGB callouts. They all work. There isn't a better or worse solution. They're all really quite nice. But what you want to make sure that you're doing is that if it selects black and white by default, if you're not careful, if I go up here, and if I have grayscale selected, that oftentimes is what you'll see by default. You can only pick black and white, and that's it if it's grayscale. So if you say, no, I don't want a grayscale anymore, I would prefer to have it in color, then you do need to click from over here in the upper right-hand corner and switch to CMYK. Or if you're designing for the web, web safe colors, or if you just prefer to work in hue, saturation, brightness, or red, green, blue, RGB, that's fine too. But we're working in CMYK. So now I can change the colors from here. And I can pick from here, like so. You can see that it starts with a yellow or orange here. Or I can come back on here and I can double click again. And I can go back to my color picker. And I can pick from the colors that they have given us in here. I think I'm going to go ahead and instead, I'm just going to pick, I'm not going to pick any one of those. I'm going to come back up here and I'm going to select their plant one. Okay. So they've already have one here. It goes from a pink to purple. Now, what they want us to do is start with the little feelers down here, whatever you want to call them, for the jellyfish. So to begin adding a gradient to it, you have to select it, make sure that the fill is selected, and you can see that they have added a bright yellow fill. And now all we have to do is we have to click on the gradient and it adds it. But we want to control the gradient a little bit differently. It added it, the gradient to each one of the three features. But instead, what I would prefer to do is to have it go from either light to dark or dark to light. So what I can do is I can select the gradient tool over here. And you can see the little widget that pops up. And right now it happens to be, I guess it's a radial gradient. I'm going to switch to a linear gradient. There we go. You can change the angle of the gradient by moving over the edge here and rotating it like so. That's one way of doing it. Another way is just to simply click and drag like so. And you can see that it's how it changes. Or if I click from here and pull down like so. If you want it to be perfectly vertical or horizontal, simply hold down the Shift key. That's a way of constraining movement for just about anything in Illustrator. Okay, so they want us to go from dark to light, I believe. So if I hold down the Shift key, I'll just do that. Click and drag, and you can see that it constrains it. Now, depending on how far you pull on this, will determine how the gradient is distributed. So if I want the gradient to start right here at the end and right up here, that will do so. If you would rather have it start here and, whoops, I didn't want to do that. Click here and then just go a short distance. That's how that works. So wherever you click is the starting point, wherever you end and release the mouse is the end point. So they want us to go like so. Okie doke. Now, if I wanted to switch, they want it to be kind of pink at the top. So I'm going to double click here. I'm going to change the color. And they want this to be a nice pink. That's light orange, light pink. That yellow, I think we want the pink. Oh, it's already pink. I think I have the right colors. Maybe, maybe not. It's difficult to tell from the book.
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble switching the spotlight to Sarah. I'm trying to find it.
Okay, hold on. Let me pause the my pause. Okay, so if you want the colors to go in the opposite direction, you can always click and drag. Or if I were to simply click here, notice how they go in the opposite direction now. It just reversed it. If you want to pull this back like so, this is changing the distribution of the colors. It's not changing the direction of the colors. If you want it a little bit shorter, just like so. Okay, so that's a simple linear gradient. The next thing that they want us to do, I skipped something here. Really, we're jumping ahead here. Okay, well, we're gonna, we could add a gradient to a stroke, but adding a gradient to a stroke is a different animal altogether. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna deselect the shape that we have here. I'm gonna select this orange shape right here. And they want us to use, I have to check the colors here. I'm gonna go with a dark, let's see. So I'm gonna go ahead and apply a gradient, and it's just this one. And I don't want it to the fill. See what it's doing with the fill? So I'm gonna go back and under here, I want to make sure that I select none. Let me just do it from here. There we go, select none. I don't want to fill. Got to make sure that the stroke is in the foreground. And now if I go ahead and I just select a gradient, you'll notice that because it's been applied to a stroke, we have 3 separate options now, and that's it. I can select apply gradient within the stroke, which is what this is doing. I can select here, apply gradient along the stroke, or I can select apply gradient across the stroke. And that's what we're doing in this particular instance. Okay. So what that does is that, and then what we can do now is we can adjust the gradient in here. At any time you want to add a color, you just simply move below the stops where you see the little plus sign, it adds. And I can go ahead and if I double click on it, and I can bring up my color picker, I can add maybe a dark purple to it, or I can add regular purple or whatever the color that they want us to use in here. Okay. And also notice that the little diamond shapes along the top they indicate the midpoint of the gradient between these two color stops. So you can always slide these back and forth like so. Now what I can also do is I can take this and I can drag it across like so. I can take, if I want to get rid of or move the pink, I can move it over here like so. If I want to get rid of a color, I can click and drag it off like so. That's how you get rid of colors. And it's quite, you know, these can get quite complicated. Right now, we're only working with maybe 2 or 3 colors. But you can have as many as, I think, 64. It gets really kind of overwhelming if it gets that much. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and pull this over here. Pull this over here. I think this is where they want it. Pull it like so. Pull this down like so. Come on. There we go. Okay. If this isn't exactly like the book, I apologize, but I'm forgetting the color callouts and that sort of thing with the color stop. But I'm covering all the salient points. So far these have been, this was the linear gradient up here. This one is also a gradient now applied to a stroke. And if I zoom out a little bit, what we want to do is we want to apply a color to the background where the pink is. So I'm going to deselect this color. I'm going to select the background color. And what I want to do now is I'm going to switch from this to black and white, because we're going to create our own gradient. And let me make sure that I have this right. This happened to me yesterday too. Let's go to, oh, I know what I did. See, I still have, I forget, and I have stroke selected. I don't want to apply this to the stroke. So I'll just go ahead and I'll say no stroke. Yeah, see, can't walk and chew gum at the same time. I'm going to make sure that the fill is in the foreground because I want to apply the gradient. There you go. So here's our linear gradient that's applied to this fill. Otherwise, the stroke is so thin, you don't realize that you've done anything to it. Yeah. So it's a linear. I'm going to switch to a radial, and it goes from the center outward. And now we can go ahead and we can begin to change the colors of this. They want us to use, for the center of this, I'll go ahead and I'll click here. Double click, and we want to use the blue, I think the light blue here. That looks kind of nice. And then we're going to change from that, we're going to go ahead and I'm going to move it outward. So like I changed the gradient for the linear one, I want the center to actually start up here. It's almost like there's a ray of light coming from the upper left-hand corner under the C here. So again, if I use the gradient tool and I come up here and I click and I drag across, whoops, I didn't want to do that. Make sure that that's selected, make sure that I have the gradient tool. There we go. Make sure that the gradient tool is selected. I guess I didn't have it selected. And if I click and I drag across like so, notice that the center of my gradient is starting where I clicked and it will end where I drag here. So now it looks like my light source is coming from the upper left-hand corner. We can change our center point. We can actually, if we want, we can add another color. We can do what we want, you know, add a number of things to this. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to change the aspect ratio to 80%. This is where you can do that, and that's what they want us to do in the book. Okay, so that changes that. We can also change the location of the center of this. You can either slide it back and forth yourself until it gets to the desired location, or we can just go ahead up here and you can put, you know, minus 45 degrees there. And that we're that will change that. Okay. Is there another, I think there's another gradient, a color that we're supposed to add to the gradient. We're supposed to add a blue before we do that. Let me just go ahead and just for the heck of it, I'm going to go ahead and add another color here, a blue, a deeper blue. So if I click here and then I double click, just to show you, this would be the blue. Notice how it's, dramatically changing that. So again, I can move this out from here, like so. Or I can do it all in the gradient panel. And this is close enough. This looks pretty good right now. So the next thing that they want us to do is they want us to apply a gradient to multiple shapes. So to do that, you need to make sure that this one is deselected, make sure that the fill is selected. And I want to select all of these outlying leaves. So I'm shift clicking, make sure that they are all selected. Now I can come back in here and I can go ahead and I'm going to add the plant gradient. Now, notice what it's done. It's added the gradient to each of the plants separately. But what I want to do instead now is that I want it to be distributed, a single gradient, across all of them. So to do that, again, I'm going to go ahead and while all of them are selected, I'm going to go ahead and select the gradient tool. And you can see that there are separate ones. And I'm going to switch from radial to linear. And I'm going to, maybe they do want it radial. I don't know. I don't remember. I'm just going to click and drag across it like so. And notice how it's taking that single gradient, but filling each of the objects and going across all of them. So was it radial? I think it was a radial. Let me switch back to a radial. So I'm going to go ahead and look at that again. I'm going to go ahead and click and drag again. Like so. So now it's a radial gradient that gets filled across there. And what I can do with all of these too is that we can change the opacity of the object. And that will change things quite dramatically as well. Okie doke. So, yeah, so that's, I remembered correctly. So now with all of those shapes selected, I'm going to change the opacity of all of them to 30%. There you go. So that darkens everything. So just within a few clicks of the mouse, you can see that you can change things pretty dramatically. I'm going to deselect all of those. The next one that they want us to work with is this shape here. So let me go ahead and zoom in on this. Now, in this part of the lesson, we're working with, excuse me, we're working with opacity. And we haven't talked about that yet, but for each of the stop colors that you add to a gradient, by default, they are opaque, but you can make them transparent. You can control each of them separately. So what I can do with a fill here is I'm going to use the one that they've created for us, the fading sky, like so. And again, because it's linear, that's what I want. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select the gradient tool, and I'm just going to go from top to bottom like so. Okay. Now, if that's going in the wrong direction, I can click and drag the opposite way, or I can just flip it like so. Now, let's look at the color at the top. And if I click on the stop color at the top, you can see that the opacity is set to 0. Now, if I were to change that, okay, to 100, just looks, it would be a solid color, wouldn't it? But from here, we can use the slider, or we can go ahead and we can go back in here, and I want it to be 0. So it's actually going from a nice deep blue to 0 opacity. That, I won't say it's a recent addition, but it was added not too many years ago, which made it a very, very powerful tool. Okay, so that's all we need to do for that. That's it, adding transparency. So anytime you want to add transparency, again, just click on the stop and change it from over here. Or if you want, you can double click on the stop, and then we can go to let me double click again. Let's click on this, the spectrum, the color bar. And down here, let me see. Do we have it from here? Maybe we don't. Nope. Okay, we don't. So it's not letting me change the opacity from here, or it's being covered up. No, I can't change it from here. Okay, never mind. That's okay. There we go. The next one is we're going to color the jellyfish itself. So let me move this over. But now what we're going to do is we're going to use the freeform feature.
Would you mind switching interpreters when you get a chance?
Huh?
Would you mind switching the interpreters when you get a chance?
Change again? Okay, hold on.
Thank you.
Let me go ahead and pause. Okay, so what we're going to do is with this one now, I'm going to select from here. I'm going to go ahead and I'll start by selecting the plant. But instead of using a radial gradient, I'm going to use the freeform. Okay, so there we go. And notice it automatically adds 3 colors. Now these are not the colors that we want, but what I can do is I can click on each of these colors and I can proceed to edit them or change them. If I want more colors, for example, if I want a color over here, I can add it. Now, right now we're using points, but in a minute you can also use lines to draw additional stops. If you want to remove a stop, then over here, just click the trash can. If you want to alter the spread, right now it's set to 0%. You can increase the size of that. And again, you know, with the opacity, you can change that. So that's what we're going to do. I'll just double click on each of these. And I'm going to switch to the here. And they want us to use, I think, an orange from here, but it's this one. So we'll use an orange. And now we're just editing colors from here. And I'll click this one, double click on it, and now we're going to select a nice pink. And then I'll select this one down here. And I think this one is going to be kind of a deep purple or purple shape color rather. That's dark blue. That's darkest purple. I'll put purple in here. And let's put purple up here too. Okay. So is this exactly like the book? Actually, no, they want it to be kind of, yeah, this goes to more of a light pink, I guess. So we'll go back over here and I'll pick the light pink. Again, these can be edited as long as you want them to be. Oh, I know what they did. They want to show you how to use the eyedropper tool. So for example, if I want this pink to be the same as this one here, if I double click on it and I use the eyedropper tool, and I just click right here, and that's what that does. It just changes it. Okay. So there's a myriad ways, just a whole slew of different ways of changing color. Now what we're going to do is we're going to use lines And if I do that, if I click here, it will add a point. If I click here, it will add another point. And if I click here, it will add another point. So notice that by default, it's adding the colors of white. But if I double click here, now I can go back in and I can select the dark purple. I can, is that dark purple? I think so. And then I'll just double click on this one. And I'll add the dark purple for that. And I'll double click on this one. And we'll add the dark purple for that. Okay, close enough for government work, okay? If they want different colors, they want different colors, it's fine. But that gives you an idea of how to do that. And if, you know, at a later time, if you want to go back to points, and I can come back here and I can, you know, I can always move these around. I can always change the spread. Right now it says 0, but what if I want it to be 30%? You know, I can change this, pull it out, make it more effective in that area or less effective. I just want a little tiny little spot of color. And that's how that's done. Very, very powerful though. Really very nice. Okay. It's like adding little droplets of watercolor. Or if you're, you know, back in the day when you airbrush, you get little spritz of color into various places. Okay. So you can add both, you know, when you're working on it. Let me select the gradient again. There we go. So now I can select these individual colors and move them around to get the look that I'm going for. Something that's a little bit closer to what the book has. And it looks, you know, it looks pretty decent. It's fine. The next tool that we're going to start working with now is not, it's a form of a gradient. It's actually one of the earliest tools that they developed, and that's the blend tool. Now, I've shown you these the other day when I was asked to do so, but you can either blend objects or you can blend strokes. It doesn't matter. And you can see they have these two little wavy lines for us right here. In a similar fashion, they blended these lines to create this shape. And I want to show you a gotcha. How this can get kind of messed up if you're not careful, but it's easy to remedy. This is the blend tool over here. And if I click here and I click on the top anchor point here, and then the top anchor point here, it will create a smooth blend. And that's what we want for this exercise. It has a very dramatic effect, and to do that any other way would be very difficult. Again, it's one of the earliest tools that they developed for before they actually had gradients. What was, you know, one of the more complex gradients, you had to use the blend tool. Now, where this can be a problem is that what if I were to click up here and then click down here on this endpoint? Whoop, it didn't do it. I want it to fail, and it's not failing. Let me move this over here a little bit. I'm going to click here and up here. There we go. It's a very, it crosses the blend. So if you don't pick like point with like point on the other shape, you can get mixed results. And that's what's happening here. Does that make sense to everybody, I hope? Okay. So like with like, top to top, you know, if I go bottom to bottom or middle to middle, and again, what I can do, let me just show you. Because remember, you can also blend shapes, and we're going to do that in a minute too. But if I just click top to top, then I get the desired result. But if you don't, if you try it on some of your shapes or your paths and you don't, and if it looks kind of wonky, then that's typically what's happened. Just undo it and try again. And just try to pick like points with like points. The next thing that they want us to do is they're going to add these little dotted lines up here in the jellyfish, which is a form of a blend. Okay, so they've already prepared it for us, meaning the little dots. So if I turn, here's the artwork, and this is for the blends. If I turn this on, you can see that they've already created little dots for us. Because right now, the default setting when you use blend is a smooth blend. It will automatically create a very smooth gradation from one shape or one path to another. But now we're going to do it in steps. So again, what I do is I select the blend tool and I click on the first one and then I click on the second one. And I just get it's a straight line because it's a smooth blend. But if I double click on the blend tool and I go from smooth color to specified steps, I'm going to select preview. Notice that it automatically blended this at 89 steps. If I change this to 10, and I turn off preview and back on, now you can see that I have the nice little, it's a very effective way of creating a nice polka dot or smooth dots. So now if I click OK, and what this is doing is that there is a path that actually connects these shapes. And I can come back with the, underneath the pen tool, if I use the convert anchor point tool, and I move over the middle of this, you can see how it will allow me to bend that path. And it's kind of like shapes or, you know, clothes hanging on a clothesline. They're each attached to that path. It's a very quick and effective way of doing something that normally would be fairly complex, to create one point and another point and then just duplicate them and try to get them evenly distributed. This does it, you know, very effectively for you. So there's lots of, you know, shortcuts like this in Illustrator that work very nicely. So likewise, I'm going to go ahead and use the blend tool again. I'm going to click on this one and I'm going to go click on this one. And again, it's set to the 10 steps. And then I'm going to go to the convert anchor point and move over until I get that little curvy line and then just bend it like so. Okie doke. So what you can also do with the blend tool that I showed you the other day, but it bears repeating, is we're going to turn on the other shapes in a minute. Yeah, before we go to patterns, yeah, let me show you this very quickly. Just to show you that if I, for example, if I create a rectangle like so.
Professor,
and,
would you mind switching the interpreters once again?
Switch it again? Okay, hold on.
Thank you.